So, what is the role of a small group leader? What will you actually be doing? Well, what we say is that our small group leaders are the frontline pastors of Eastside. They're really the ones who are responsible for helping people to make friends, follow Jesus, and make a difference. Now, I know when I say that, for some people, they get really excited, and other people, they get really freaked out, and they're like, I'm not a pastor, I can't do that. But the truth is that a pastor is really just someone who cares for the people that God has entrusted to them. And so if you're a small group leader, that's really your job. That's your role, is to care for the people that are in your group, to care for the people that God has entrusted to you. So how do you get started? Well, the first thing is that you have to prepare for the group. You got to figure out what you're doing. And step one of that is to pick a day, a time, a location, and an activity or a curriculum that you're going to do with your group. Once you've got that stuff figured out, then you'll actually register the group. And this is where you tell us like what you'll be doing and when you'll be doing it and all of that, so we know. And we can help you promote that the next time that we launch groups during the next semester. And we send a link out to you, to our leaders every semester, so you know when that time comes. Once you've registered the group, really the next thing that you want to do is to begin to make personal invitations for people to join you at the group. You know, we're going to promote your group. We're going to try to help people get connected with your group. But the truth is, the most powerful way to get people to join is just for you to invite them. It does way more than if I stand up on stage or Gene stands up on stage and says, hey, you should come, to get a personal invitation from the person who's actually leading the group. After that, you do want to be sure to be proactive about responding to people who have said that they're interested in your group, whether that's people that you've reached out to or people who come to you online via our group finder at one of our small group expos. And really the goal is to get back to those people within 24 hours. Put yourself in their shoes and think, if you were wanting to check something out, if you were wanting to join something, you were excited about it, you'd want people to respond to you quickly so that you could go ahead and move forward. And so we want to make sure that we're doing that with the people who are interested in the groups that we're leading as well. We do encourage you to participate in our next small group expo. And that's really an opportunity for people who are at church on the weekend to come and to meet you. We do those in the lobbies, in the hallways at all of our campuses. You can talk with them a little bit more about your group, and then they can sign up for the group then if they're interested in joining it. Now, once you participate in the expo, you're ready to start the group, there's a couple things that you want to do to get ready. So 5 days prior to your group, you want to do two things. The first thing is to ask for RSVPs from everybody who has expressed an interest in joining. You want to actually know how many people are coming to your house on whatever, or going to meet you in Starbucks or wherever you're hosting that group, so that you're kind of aware of how many people to expect. And then the second thing is to begin praying for the group each day. Right? We're really wanting to be intentional about investing in the people who are in the group, the group itself, through prayer. This is something where we're joining God on his mission, and so we want to ask him to be involved in what we're doing in a very intentional way. And then the night before or the morning of the group, you want to send a reminder text or a reminder email. You want to give people that last hit of like, oh, hey, this is coming up. Don't forget about this. And it also gives them another opportunity to say, oh, yes, I want to be there. My plans changed and I can't be there. I'm sorry about that. So that's all the prep stuff. Then you're actually going to host your first group. You're going to lead your first group meeting. So when you do that, the first thing that you want to do is prepare the meeting space, right? Like if your house has a funky odor, open the windows before they come over. Let that odor get outside. If you're going to be at the Starbucks, like you might show up a half hour early to make sure that you can kind of get seating and get things arranged and there's a space for your group to actually meet in. Make a welcoming environment. Set it up so that people feel like you're ready for them, you're excited for them, you've prepared for them to come. A key thing here is you want to have food. Right? Like food is something that just opens up a conversation. It helps people begin to talk. I will sometimes have the big agenda for my first small group meeting be dinner. And so we'll eat together. Now, if this is your first time leading a small group, I wouldn't necessarily recommend that you try to cook a full meal because it can add stress that you just don't need. But having a little something for people to eat is really an important part of leading a group, especially that first small group. Once people arrive, you want to spend 10 to 60 minutes, depending on what your agenda is for the evening and kind of what's going on, just kind of mingling, chatting, eating, just a little bit of time for people to kind of open up, warm up, begin to get to know one another a little bit. Now, if during this time you see someone standing off to the side, kind of by themselves, they'll probably be on their phone so they don't look awkward like they're sending some important email that just couldn't possibly wait until after the group. The truth is they probably feel a little bit uncomfortable and they're not quite sure how to open up a conversation. And so go begin to talk to that person, but don't just engage them yourself. Actually bring them over and introduce them to other people who are in the group and help them begin to warm up and begin to share conversation with the rest of the group as well. Now, when you begin kind of the more formal meeting time, you're going to want to start by doing introductions, right? Like you want people to begin to get to know one another. So normally a couple things you have people do. Obviously, give their name, and this is something that you want to do probably for the first couple of weeks, have people share their name. Maybe have them share why they were interested in joining the group, what it was about the group that made them decide they wanted to come. And then sometimes it's a good idea to ask an icebreaker question, and you don't have to do this. And sometimes icebreakers can be really cheesy. You may have been a part of a small group or a working group or something at your job before where like there was really dumb icebreakers that people asked and they were like, what's your favorite cheese or something stupid. I encourage you to ask a better icebreaker than that. My personal favorite, and you can steal this one, is tell us a story about your best friend from childhood. Because it goes to this place that's personal, but it's not painful. It helps you to really get to know that person and get them to begin to open up about their life a little bit. But it's not something difficult or awkward that they wouldn't want to share with a group of people they don't know very well yet. Now, during your first group meeting, you want to review kind of the goals and expectations for your group, right? Like you want to kind of set up front what you want people to do. So is this a group where like they've got to come every week, like regular attendance is super important, and unless they're out of town, they need to be there? Are you okay with people kind of popping in and out? Maybe setting some ground rules about confidentiality and just the idea that what's said in the group stays in the group. Think through kind of what you want the dynamics of your group to be and lay those things out up front. Don't be real militant about it, but let people know. And then if you need to kind of have a conversation with someone later, if something isn't going well with that person or maybe the group you feel like has gotten a little bit off track, you have that to point back to and say, hey, you know, we talked about this stuff at the beginning. I feel like we're not quite there. And you can adjust a little bit more easily than if you haven't set those things up front. The next thing that you're going to do is start your curriculum or your activity if that's appropriate. Now, some groups, you know, you're not really going to dive into the curriculum on the first week or dive into the activity on the first week. That's fine. It might be just purely a get-to-know-you week. Other groups, you might actually begin that. And so, for instance, our first growth track curriculum, Engage with God, actually has all of that stuff built in so that if you're starting the group, like it's got the icebreaker questions, it's got some of the stuff about goals and expectations. It's got a little bit of curriculum to introduce what the group is all about, so that stuff is really handled for you. Then before you end the group, you want to make sure that you review the logistics of the small group. Just kind of anything that people need to know about, you know, where you're meeting, kind of if that's going to change week to week for some reason. I really encourage that to be something that's consistent, at least at the beginning. But, you know, if you realize the Starbucks didn't work out, you're going to move to, you know, a different restaurant, a coffee shop, somebody's home, whatever. If there's any homework that people need to do for the next week, just anything they need to know to kind of help the group to function well. After that, you can close in prayer if it's appropriate for your group. Some groups, that would be a little awkward just based on the makeup and the dynamics of the group. But if appropriate, then you want to go ahead and close in prayer. And then within 24 hours of the group ending, send a wrap-up email or a wrap-up text, just kind of talking to people about what happened, you know, recovering anything that they might need to know in terms of homework, logistics, anything like that. That's also really helpful for anybody who couldn't make the first week, so they kind of know what to expect the following week. Now, that's the first night, but of course, you're not done just because the first night is done. You've got to kind of keep the group going. You've got to keep it moving. So how do you make the subsequent meetings work? Well, the day before your next meeting, you want to send an email or a text once again, confirming attendance and asking people to RSVP. So again, you know how many people are going to show up. Now, you may or may not do this every single week, but for the first 2 or 3 weeks, as people are figuring out if this is the right group for them, as you're figuring out how many people are going to be there, it's really an important step to kind of get a sense of who's going to be there. In terms of a framework for what you're going to do, because obviously the subsequent meetings, you're not going to do everything exactly the same. But here's kind of a framework that you can tailor to your group. You want to begin with welcome and conversation. Again, this is the casual time when people are just kind of showing up. This is usually about 10 to 30 minutes long. And this is just a good time for people to kind of catch up on their weeks, catch up on how things are going. You're going to do introductions again. And like I said earlier, the first 2 to 3 weeks, you want to do introductions, or anytime that a new person joins the group. And if it's 6 weeks in and a new person joins, you don't have to go through a whole big icebreaker thing and all that, but at the very least, go over names so that person can begin to learn the names of the people who are in the group. Once you're done with that, then you're going to dive into your content. The activity that you came to do, the study that you came to do, the curriculum that you're doing, the video that you're watching for that curriculum, whatever that is, you're going to begin that content piece. And that's usually 45 to 75 minutes long. It varies depending on the group, but typically that's a good time frame. And then at the end, you're going to want to do a wrap-up. This is where you might close in prayer. This is, again, where you go over the logistics and all of that. In total, most groups last for about 2 hours. Some are a little bit shorter, 90 minutes or so. Some even are kind of quick. Maybe it's over a lunch break or something, and it's an hour-long group. But that's really the time frame that most groups are, is about that 2-hour mark. Now, there's the question of how do I lead a group well? Like that's kind of the stuff about just practically how do I get started? How do I do all the functional stuff of making the group happen? But how do I actually lead it well and make this a really good experience for people? Well, the first thing that you want to do is begin with the end in mind, right? Like you want to think about what are the goals for the group? What are we trying to accomplish? And that takes us back to our small group vision, to make friends, to follow Jesus, and to make a difference. And as you're making decisions about your group, as you're thinking about what to do or what not to do, think about if it's something that helps to accomplish one of those three things. Is it helping people to become better friends? Is it helping people to follow Jesus, to take next steps in their faith? Or is it somehow impacting the world around you and the other people who are not a part of your group? The second thing that you want to do to lead your group well is to remember that you're leading people, not a meeting. This is really important. Like, your goal is not to have a really good meeting. It's to really invest in people, to begin to get to know them, to dive into each other's life, to help them grow. And so on some level, I don't totally care what happens about the 2 hours between 7 and 9 p.m. or whatever when your group meets. Really what's more important is there a true community forming? Are people building relationships that go outside of the group? Are people taking steps in their life that isn't at church and isn't in small group that are steps towards Jesus? Are they growing to become more like Jesus as a result of the group? You're leading people, not a meeting. The third thing then is to engage with your coach or your director, right? Your coach and director are people who are there to really help you figure out what it is to lead. When you've got questions, they're your first stop. When something big comes up and you're like, I don't know how to handle this thing, what do I do? Your coach and your director are there to be a resource for you, and they can help you figure it out, strategize, talk you through the situation. Or if they're not sure or they feel like this is a bigger thing than you guys can handle, then they know how to get in touch with us as staff and the best people to reach out to kind of solve the problem or figure out what the next step should be. So make sure that you are regularly engaging with your coach or your director. And then the fourth and final thing is to participate in leadership huddles. At all of our campuses, we do these leadership huddles that are really designed to help you continue to grow as a leader, to continue to develop your skills. And so if you want to be good at this, make sure that you're coming to those. It'll give you an opportunity not just to hear from someone who's talking from the stage, but also to get to know some other leaders, to hear from their insights and their wisdom. It's an opportunity to kind of gain some collective experience and collective wisdom from people who have been leading for a long time and others like yourselves who are just starting out.